それでは時間が参りましたので、セミナーを始めさせていただきたいと思います。本日はお忙しい中、セミナーにご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。本日の司会進行役を務めさせていただきます、共催者の海外投資情報財団の板垣と申します。本日のセミナーは、インドセミナーということで、マユール・バトラー会計事務所、主催、弊社海外投資情報財団、との共催で、駐日インド大使館の講演によりお送りしてまいります。本日のセミナーの内容は日英同時通訳にてお送りいたしますので、お手元のレシーバーお受け取りになられたレシーバーがあると思いますが、そちらをお使いいただきまして、チャンネルの方がですね、1番が日本語、2番が英語となっておりますので、ご視聴いただければと思います。ではまずはじめに、そうですね、そちらにプログラム資料、入り口のところでお受け取りになられたかと思いますが、お手元にもし、お持ちでない方がいらっしゃいましたら、後ろの窓口の方に、資料ございますのでお受け取りいただければと思います。では最初に、在京インド大使館のアルビンド新公使よりご挨拶をいただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いいたします。
Itagaki-san, Mr. Chaudhary, Mr. Mayur Batra, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to listen to my thoughts at this seminar on India, which is very timely because the world's attention is again focused on India in the last few months, especially after the last elections. So the decisive mandate in the elections, the formation of the government in New Delhi, and early announcements by its leadership have led to a rise in expectations of performance and about India's future, both within India and across the world. The recent visits to India by world leaders, the stock market rally, the rise in new business investment announcements, and the surge in the flow of funds from overseas institutions are proof of this rise in expectations. The union budget has been presented recently, and it was the new government's first major policy statement. Now, if we look back a few years, the last 2 years were very tumultuous for the Indian economy. There was a slowing down of growth, the rupee was depreciating, inflation was going up, there was rising fiscal deficit, and a fall in foreign exchange reserves, which were serious challenges confronting the economy. During the first decade of this century, the high growth rates of the Indian economy had caught the world's imagination, as India's real GDP grew as fast as 8.6% and 9.3% as recently as in 2009-10 and 2010-11. So it was as high as 9.3% in 2010-11. However, subsequent developments in India led a few analysts to question and doubt the India story. Corrective action by policymakers and strong fundamentals have put the economy back on course, and several macroeconomic indicators are showing signs of improvement. India is seen today as one of the better performing emerging market economies, and it is believed that its vector of growth is headed upwards again. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a fact that no one is insulated from external factors in today's globalized world. The performance of India and the emerging market economies should be judged against the prevailing global economic environment. Very often, while policymakers can take steps to fix problems in the domestic economy, their options are sometimes limited, circumscribed, due to external policy actions or shocks. Now, announcements of shifts in monetary policy by the US Fed that we are all aware of, and stagnation in the euro area have worsened the environment for emerging economies in recent years, especially after the 2008 meltdown. We saw volatility in capital flows to emerging economies, and this created panic in some countries. Today, the crisis is abated, and all predictions are there that in the near future, we'll see the growth momentum coming back, especially in EU, a little bit in Japan, and in high growth emerging economies such as India. As far as the United States is concerned, the IMF has downgraded its predictions about growth. But the corner has been turned in India's context, and the IMF predicts that the Indian economy will grow at 5.4% and 6.4% in the next 2 years. However, there are certain concerns that need to be addressed, going by our past performance. Number one, the slowing down of investment. There has been a visible decline in investment and exports, and therefore efforts are required to restart the investment cycle to boost the demand components of GDP and to attract foreign direct investment into India. B, the lack of growth in the manufacturing sector. The contribution of the manufacturing sector to India's GDP has remained stagnant at around 15%. The national manufacturing policy aims at raising this to 25% in the next decade, and this calls for addressing the concerns of investors regarding land acquisition, inadequate physical infrastructure, and labor market rigidities. So we've talked about slowing down of investment, lack of growth in manufacturing sector. There is also the important question of the quality of restraint in fiscal deficit. While inflation is softening and the current account deficit in India has been brought under control, it remains to be seen if the import compression that has aided the process is sustainable, because significantly this reduction in the trade deficit or the fiscal deficit has been brought about by a compression of gold imports. So once growth rate improves, imports, especially of natural gas, coal and petroleum products are expected to rise, once the economy starts growing. Moreover, 90% of the national government subsidies go to reduce the cost of food, fertilizers and fuel for end consumers in India. So subsidy reform is a policy imperative that is, we know, very often very difficult to implement. Now, having talked about these three major concerns, we see that recently the budget was announced in the beginning of the month of July and beginning of last month, about a month from now. And some of the proposals that have been announced in this budget address some of these concerns. And while today's speakers, when one goes through the list, there will be people who will be talking about these business policy decisions or tax implications and other issues in detail later, I will mention a few relevant announcements which can serve as a backdrop for all of us. Importantly, number one, fiscal deficit targets have been retained at 4.1% of GDP for 2014-15, 3.6% for 2015-16, and 3% for 2016-17, affirming the government's aims at, that it is very serious about fiscal consolidation. A major announcement about reforms in tax administration. It has been clearly stated in this budget speech of the finance minister that retrospective legislation will be exercised with extreme caution. While it is a sovereign right of any government, it will be exercised with extreme caution. A stable and predictable tax regime is predicted, and steps will be taken to sort out the huge pending tax demand that is under dispute and litigation. It's a very high amount, I will not mention it, but the government is serious about taking steps to eliminate this. The government has also announced an early introduction of the goods and services tax, which was a direct tax reform that most of the observers of India have been asking for. And on the question of subsidies that I mentioned earlier, the finance minister has announced the setting up of an expenditure management commission, which will go into the whole range of issues about the kind of expenditures that need to be curbed and the kind of expenditures that need to be prioritized and increased. So an expenditure reforms commission will come up and go into the whole question of subsidies. And one very important thing is the liberalization in the foreign direct investment regime to restart the investment cycle in India. While the budget announced 49%, up to a hike in the limit from 26% to 49% in insurance, and it said that manufacturing units will be permitted now to sell products through the retail and e-commerce platforms. Today only we have the news that the cabinet has taken a decision, the union government has taken a decision to permit up to 49% foreign direct investment in both defense and the railway sector, which is also a further step towards liberalizing the foreign direct investment regime in the country. A new structure has been announced in the budget to incentivize investment in infrastructure because, all estimates say, for instance, the 12th plan document says that India needs about $1 trillion of investment in infrastructure from both public, private, and PPP modes. So a new structure to incentivize investment flow, the infrastructure investment trusts have been announced, and these will be set up to direct flow of funds, especially long-term funds which are required for investment in infrastructure. and the setting up of a national industrial corridor authority. We have heard of a lot of corridors which are going on, some with Japanese assistance, some with other assistance, some with World Bank help. So the government is to streamline the work of this, setting up this important industrial infrastructure. The setting up of a national industrial corridor authority has been announced in this budget. Now, we've talked about the problems and the concerns of the Indian economy, how some of these have been addressed in the recent budget by a government which has just recently taken over. Since all of us are now in Tokyo and most of us here are representatives of Japanese institutions, we should focus now on the India-Japan story. And if you look at the growing exchanges between India and Japan, never have our political and economic ties been at such a historic high. The global and strategic partnership, which has defined relations since the beginning of this century between India and Japan, has ensured a deepening of this bilateral relationship. It is extraordinary, to say the least, to have 2 prime ministerial visits and 1 state visit within a year between 2 countries, and that has been the case between India and Japan in the last 12 months. Our new Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, is strongly committed to this relationship, having visited Japan twice as Chief Minister of Gujarat and worked with Japanese officials and investors while pitching for investment in that state. And he's due to shortly visit Tokyo again as his first major visit outside India, a bilateral visit to Japan, and shortly he'll be here again in Tokyo. So looking ahead, we feel there will be stronger political and economic engagement between the 2 countries. There are strong complementarities that exist between the 2 economies. While Japan has an abundance of capital and cutting-edge technology, it faces a dwindling market and population. The Indian economy is characterized by a booming market, fueled by the growth of an aspirational middle class, but it faces an infrastructure deficit and needs access to technology, especially in manufacturing. India-Japan economic relationships, therefore, have tremendous potential for growth and expansion. The 2 nations signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement in February 2011. Following that, we have seen some growth in the volumes of bilateral trade. At $16.31 billion in 13-14, it does not compare much with Japan-China and India-China trade. But we expect tariff cuts in the future and some efforts by people on both sides, policymakers and companies and traders, we could see a jump in volumes. Japanese companies have invested $15.36 billion in India between 2000 and 2013, making Japan the 4th largest source of foreign direct investment in India. Japanese overseas development assistance has supported India's economic development in priority areas such as power, transportation, environment, and in crucial social sectors such as health and education. The cumulative commitment today of Japanese ODA loans to India has reached 4,150 billion yen. Flagship projects such as the dedicated freight corridor in the western part of the country, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, and the proposed Chennai-Bangalore Industrial Corridor will be high-impact infrastructure projects that will be implemented in India with Japanese assistance. Japanese cars today dominate the Indian market, and automakers from Japan are expanding their production bases in India, targeting not only the domestic market in that country, but making India the hub for exports to West Asia and Africa on one hand, and South and Southeast Asia on the other. Similarly, heavy electrical machinery manufacturers and trading houses are also eyeing the growth in India's power equipment market. Profitable sectors that could attract Japanese investment include smart cities, the rejuvenation of rivers, water treatment, high-speed railway, infrastructure, renewable energy, electronic hardware, food processing, and the life sciences. The mega infrastructure projects of the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor, which draws on a step loan, wherein the bidding process favors Japanese companies. The bidding is restricted that only Japanese companies can participate. Similarly, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor and the Chennai-Bangalore Industrial Corridor offer unprecedented opportunities for Japanese industry and products to enter India. The task before us, ladies and gentlemen, is to get traction from corporate Japan. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing, and I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to deliver the inaugural address at this seminar. Thank you very much.
「新講師ありがとうございました」。それでは続きまして、主催者であるマイユール・パタヤ会計事務所のアソシエイトディレクターをされていらっしゃいます山根明子様より、 当社に関するご紹介をいただきます。
皆さん、こんにちは。本日はセミナーにご参加いただきまして、誠にありがとうございます。私の方からですね、まず弊社の紹介をちょっと簡単にさせていただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いいたします。弊社、マユール・バトラー会計事務所なんですけれども、前に座っておりますマユール・バトラー、彼が2002年に設立をした会社でございます。現在ですね、ニューデリーを本社といたしまして、ムンバイ、バンガロール、チェンナイ、アーメダバードとインド国内には5拠点事業所を展開しております。東京にも事務所を持っておりまして、日印でサポートをしているんですけれども、弊社のお客様の8割、9割方が日系企業様になっておりまして、インド進出後の皆様の会計業務、税金業務、監査業務、その他諸々のアドバイザリー業務に加えまして、日本側での本社とのサポートといったところも展開をしております。もう少し弊社のサポート内容を詳しく見ていきますと、まずですね、インド国内の例えば進出後のですね、移転価格税制、こういったところの支援、それから駐在員様をインドに派遣された際の駐在員様の給与計算、それから税金計算業務、それから税務訴訟の対応、こういった業務をサポートをさせていただいております。それから M&A のサポート業務といたしまして、取引先ですとかパートナー、提携先の紹介、こういった業務に加えまして、もうすでにパートナーさんを見つけてますよという会社様につきましては、そういったパートナー先のデューデリジェンス、財務デューデリジェンス、法務デューデリジェンス、そういったところのお手伝い、それから企業価値の評価、そういったお手伝いもさせていただいております。もちろん会計事務所ですので、会計業務に日々の